What's up, y'all? Whit here, coming at you from Atlanta, Georgia, and today we're going to go over some compression basics using Nectar Pro's vocal compressor from Izotope. Let's take a look. What is compression? Compression is a tool that reduces the overall dynamic range of an audio signal. Alright, so what is dynamic range? Dynamic range is the difference between the softest and the loudest sounds of an audio waveform. If a track has a large dynamic range, then there is a big difference in the amplitude between the smallest and the loudest peaks of an audio waveform. If it has a small dynamic range, then there is not much difference in amplitude between the quietest and the loudest peaks. So why use compression? This is actually a loaded question that has several different answers, but most of the time, audio engineers are using compression to level out an audio signal so that the loud parts aren't overpowering and the subtle, nuanced, quiet parts don't get lost in the mix and remain present. Today we're going to be in Ableton Live taking a look at Izotope's Nectar Pro vocal processor, and we're going to use the compressor to see how we can get some clarity within a vocal mix. Today we'll be mixing some hip-hop R&B vocals by Finite. Now let's take a listen to that lead vocal track without compression.
You said do it like you did it when you do it for me. You coming up like what? Been a long time, baby. I say you know I could do it, but I won't do it for free. I only do it for my city that come right before the beat. Ay.
Now let's take a listen to it with compression.
You said do it like you did it when you do it for me. You coming up like what? Been a long time, baby. I say you know I could do it, but I won't do it for free. I only do it for my city that come right before the beat. Ay.
Alright, so I'd say right off the bat, I hear a difference, but it is subtle, and that's okay. Subtle's sometimes really good for compression. My intention with that was to have the vocals sort of swell and pop rhythmically, and to have all the small nuances in the performance come forward in the mix. I think I achieved that. Now we're going to see how to dial in a setting like that on Nectar's compressor. I have it pulled up right here with the audio muted, basically just so you can hear me talk. You'd want to be making these adjustments based off of what you're listening to in a real application anyway. So the first thing we're going to take a look at on our compressor is this white line here called the threshold. The threshold is basically the point in the volume of the signal which the compressor is triggered at. You can see the audio waveform in the compressor here. Now if we bring down this white threshold line, you can see some of the peaks of the waveform hitting above the white threshold line. This is the audio that will be compressed. The next thing we're going to take a look at down here is our ratio knob. Essentially the ratio is how much compression you are adding to your mix. Let's turn it up a little bit. Alright, so as I turn up the ratio knob, you can see that orange line up the top reflect how much compression is now going on. I have it set so it's definitely doing a bit of compression, not a whole lot though. Okay, next we have our attack and release knobs. These are kind of confusing at first, but I like to think of them as our action on and our action off of the compressor. So I'm going to set the compressor to have a pretty fast attack here. That's going to give me the rhythmic effect that I'm looking for, and it's going to bring some of those quiet nuanced parts forward a little bit faster. If I were to have a longer attack, it would preserve the original punch of the sound a little bit better, but those quiet parts would kind of get lost a little easier. Alright, so moving on to the release. I'm going to keep that release time still pretty quick, a little bit longer than our attack time, but I'm going to have a nice fast release. That's going to give me kind of an aggressive, sort of present quality to it. If I wanted it to be pushed back a little farther, I would just simply turn up the release time. Sometimes I can get your sound sort of lost in the mix if you have that release time too high. And finally is our makeup gain knob, which is just adding or taking away volume as you see fit. I've added just a little bit here. Next, you'll see the RMS and the peak button. This is basically just choosing how the compressor is calculating how it's going to do its compression, whether or not it's using average loudness or the audio waveform peaks themselves. I think RMS is a little bit smoother for vocals, so we have it set here. And finally is the compressor mode over here. These just emulate a few famous compressor types. I have ours set to digital because, hey, we're making digital music. Why not? Well, honestly, I could talk a lot more about compression, but I think that about wraps it up for today. Hopefully you learned a little something about compression, at least a little bit more about Nectar Pro's compressor from Izotope. Y'all have a good one. Peace.